Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Talks program of Art Fair Philippines 2021. I'm Lisa Periquet, co-founder of the fair. Our talk today is a panel discussion on the workings behind the development of an archive focused on Philippine photography. Before we begin, just a few reminders. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the demonstration. Please type in your questions using the Q&A box in the bottom right of your screen, and the moderator will read out your question. Now, Art Fair Philippines Talks is presented together with our education partners, the Ateneo Art Gallery, Museum Foundation of the Philippines, and Art Review. Let me pass you now on to Boots Herrera of the Ateneo Art Gallery, who will introduce the panelists and moderate today's session.
Thank you, Lisa. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon session. Photography has always been given a special regard in the programming of Art Fair Philippines. In fact, the recent exhibition we had here at Ateneo Art Gallery, titled Not Visual Noise, which opened in 2019, was an offshoot of a previous Art Fair project. This year, Art Fair is focusing on the practice of archiving in relation to photography. In recent years, archiving has been an important component in contemporary art practice. It is integral in the construction of histories, as it is concerned with compiling resource materials in both analog and digital formats. Our session today focuses on Luzviminda, an archive of Philippine photography housed under Pioneer Studios. Its theme includes the following: Katya Guerrero as one of the founders, Lara de Los Reyes, a visual artist and also the person in charge of digitization and photo restoration, Miguel Gomez II, in charge of post-processing and file management, and Luis Mesa, in charge of printing and framing. Corollary to its archiving work, Luzviminda aims to create touring exhibitions to promote their projects, as well as develop an audience and market for Philippine photography. More importantly, Luzviminda is primarily a digital photo archive. It is this process of digitizing analog films and maintaining these irreplaceable originals that they will share with us today. After this presentation, the panel will be joined by an academic whose study has been focused on photography, Mr. JPaul Manzanilla. So we'll introduce him later after the presentation of Katya, Lara, and Miguel and Luis. So what we see here is actually just a set of photographs compiled by Luzviminda to give you an overview of the projects they have been working on. Perhaps in relation to their working with Luzviminda, we actually, I think indirectly, we worked with them through Pioneer Studios for our past photography projects for printing and also archiving, particularly in relation to the project of Alex Baluyot. So maybe we can ask Katya to turn on your yes, and begin the presentation for Luzviminda. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Boots, for the introduction. As Miss Boots has said, the Luzviminda is still a project at the moment. It's a project of Pioneer Studios. Um, so it's not a full-blown independent project. Actually, it started in 2000, late 2017. Um, and basically, I wanted it to be web-based because it was my second project. The first one was the bookstore. And this one is the next project because I was thinking that a platform for photography would be quite interesting since many photo practitioners didn't have websites. Um, so this was the beginnings of Luzviminda. And yes, as Boots has mentioned, Pioneer Studios provides printing services, and we've already dealt with many different artists and photographers. So we basically had um, the somehow the abilities and the facilities to wait, hello? Hello?
Yeah,
Yes.
we can hear you.
So Pioneer Studios has had the ability to actually start working on archives. Okay, so actually from 2017 to 2020, we were doing Luz Lumenda very informally on the downtime of the company. Uh, okay, so I would like to start. Basically, I would like to discuss the challenges that we encountered in making this happen, this project. No, so
Mhm.
from 2017 to the present. I will start with the collections and discuss the first challenge, which is how to gain the trust of the photo practitioners. Um, yeah, the first challenge is to gain the trust of the photo practitioners. Actually, this was a very tough thing. At first, I was very optimistic about introducing the project. I was very formal about it. I wrote letters, I presented contracts. Can you put the slide of the photo practitioners? Um, Actually, I also use the term photo practitioners because I
Mm.
didn't want to alienate people that didn't call themselves professional photographers.
Right.
So it's a very broad category.
Mhm.
And I wanted it to be very inclusive. Um, I didn't want to create so much hierarchy at first. So it's a more open-ended and broad selection of what we believe to be photography.
Mhm.
Um, so the there were many challenges in convincing photo practitioners. I will just give a few examples uh, and to compare. Okay, there are two types of photo practitioners, and basically photo practitioners that had analog collections mostly, and then photo practitioners who's mostly younger and basically shoot digital. So, Lara, can you show the contracts? I basically had some contracts drafted. The analog contract is different from the digital archive contract. The analog contract entailed that they would trust us with their negatives, with their masters, basically. Um, in Alex Baluyut's case, he came here one day, with an appointment, okay, with a red suitcase from Laguna, and basically brought his entire collection. There was, so it was like in one go, we got his collection and we started working on it. It basically took us a whole year till his we had exhibitions. So one exhibition was Journey, which was at Crucible Gallery, and the second exhibition was at called Brotherhood, his Brotherhood series, which was at Benilde. So that took a whole year from 2017 when he first came here. That was November 28, 2017. And then the two exhibitions were 2018 October. Both started October. So the rhythm was slightly different because we saw everything in one go. So that's why in some cases, for some photo practitioners, they were very afraid to show us the archives in one go. Now I just have to explain why it's more better and more efficient to see it in one go is we have to assess the collection. Um, it's you know it's like a filtering process. So if you're gonna be a bit hesitant, it becomes very tricky, and it has to be an ongoing discussion. In contrast, another photo practitioner we dealt with was George Gascon. With George Gascon, the difference was he gave us his negatives in installments, which also worked. Actually, pretty much his like we did it in an escalating manner. Currently, we ended with his Singapore series, which is still in the works right now. So with George Gascon, same with Alex. We met him in 2017. We went to his farm in Cavite. And then now we're in 2021 and we're still processing his Singapore series. So the pacing can change. With another photo practitioner such as Sunny Yabao, who passed away. When did Sunny Yabao pass away? 20 February 11, 2021. Um, it was also very different. Although he's very close to both other photo practitioners, Alex and George, they were basically contemporaries. And of course, George could have endorsed to Sunny, or Alex could have endorsed to Sunny as well. But with Sunny, we actually only got prints, a whole stack of prints, which was also very interesting. At first, I was very, very hesitant because my basic impression was prints were not as good as negatives. But surprisingly enough, we got good quality scans from his works. It's very gritty, his style. So it was somehow viable. So with the other type of photo practitioners, like younger people, like VJ Villafranca, yes, move the slide towards digital. It's a more relaxed type of contract where they're just basically required to submit web files to us, and they will submit it and we will upload it in the website. So the work involved is much less. We don't really, we can put their materials instantly online. Although, just to be clear also, with the contract, um, we actually never charged anyone, and we did everything for free. No, uh, it's kind of like a bit strange, but that was the approach I chose for this project. So there wasn't this thing of like an entry fee or something like that. Um, so it's been tough. Also in the contract, there's no restrictions saying you cannot have an exhibition somewhere else. Actually, and there is obviously a termination clause. So it's not binding, no? But as I said, I think typically Filipinos or artists or photo practitioners are very intimidated by paperwork. And but actually the paperwork is just an opportunity to um, to come up with a mutual agreement. But yes, that was a very challenging thing for me, particularly because I had to present it to them. But so yon, basically with the archive, it was really touch and go. And so at certain points, I had to learn how to be very flexible in dealing with the different photo practitioners. Um, okay, so basically that I would say that's the main issue for the first challenge. The second challenge was to find a team to work on the archive. Now, um, it kind of goes hand in hand with convincing photo practitioners because right now actually we had an influx of archives, but even with the current staff, it's hard to actually cope sometimes with the load. So the reality is um, it kind of goes hand in hand. Ideal scenario, there could be more people working, of course. And why was it so difficult to find people to work in the archive? Well, at first, of course, we didn't want to absorb the cost. Um, as I said, since 2017, from time to time, we, on our downtime, we did projects for Luzviminda. I had part-time people. Actually, Lara started working with us part-time while she was still employed in another company. Other people like Datu Arellano worked also with us early on. Um, Photo retouching, photo restoration, and all like that. And there were other people who worked for us, but on a part-time basis. It's only this year that I decided that we need to somehow formalize the team. Um, in fact, there are still really missing links in the organization. Um, so so that's the problem. Actually, in my experience, for example, printing is not really taught anywhere. It's like the skill of printing. It's taught in schools, but in a very superficial manner, no? Because printing is, well, in photography printing, there's people that are considered master printers. So if you really want to print fine art, you have to be a master printer, whether it's in the analog realm or the digital realm. And in the Philippines, it's hard to come by that kind of quality. So so basically here we learned over time everything. Now with digitization, I would say, well, it's pretty easy to handle a scanner really, but you just need a scanner. But the type of digitization that we do in Luzviminda is slightly different than a typical archivist. What would a typical archivist would do? Because in the typical archivist would just digitize to preserve the document, no? The document like as is, like a snapshot, like a 4-hour snapshot, just preserve it as is, 1:1. But in Luz Remenda, we actually do digitization almost to create a digital master of the original. Um, in so we actually uh, really clean it up with keeping the integrity of the image. Obviously, we don't touch it, in such a way that it disrupts it. But for the image to be reproduced again and exhibited, a lot of work goes into that. To make that happen, we go through, yeah, I mean, Lara will explain later how much time is spent on images and to the printing process. So actually, it's a very, very long process. Um, but yes, it's also been a struggle for us to tap people that are somehow interested in history, in research, and in writing about photography. Aside from the team that works in our studio, I have tapped various people to write in the Luzviminda website, to write profiles particularly. And it's been a challenge to actually, how would you say it? I have to actually look for people aggressively to write. It's not like people come to me, nothing like that. So, for example, uh, Lara Aquin was what I chose Lara Aquin to write about Gascon. I was actually very, very happy with her writing. She's currently working on. I've asked her to continue working on Gascon since the beginning. Now she's working on preparing some writings for a retrospective. So with Gascon, it will be like he will be the first one we will try to uh, make a retrospective. So there are many of the writers come from either art history background or they worked in media. Um, Sometimes it's difficult to write about photography because there's a particular language, familiarity with technical terms, its particular histories, the tone also. I think the tone is very, very important. Lastly, um, there is really a need, like in conservation, because every day we find things here. The originals we cannot really do anything with the originals to save them. So right now there's really no conservators for photography. So that's really a struggle for us because when we digitize, we don't digitize everything. We cannot. It's like physically impossible. It will take us 5 years just for one practitioner. So because of that, in the back of my in the back of our minds, this the originals really are in danger also. So those are some of the challenges about putting together a team for photography, because it's really considering there's a lot of photographers, that doesn't mean that there are people adequate to take care of photographic archives. So now let's go to the next topic. I will pass this is the this topic will be discussed by Lara. So she's the one that's focusing on digitization and photo restoration. Okay, Lara, you can start.
Um, Lara, we can't hear you, and can you turn on your video? Maybe Katya, you can stop your video first. and then we'll have Lara.
Okay.
So where's Lara now? Lara, are you there? You should, because you're sharing the screen. Lara, is your microphone on? Your audio?
Yes, hello.
Okay, you can share your screen again. We don't see you.
Yes.
Okay, there.
Hi, so my name is Lara, and today I'll be talking about the digital archiving and restoration we do at Luzviminda. So, right, as most of you know, photographers have a massive library. As Katya mentioned, we've had photographers like Alex Baluyot and George Cascon that have submitted numerous negatives as part of their collection. Here we have Napamir the second with his father Napamir's negatives. This is also part of Napamir's collection. We also have photographers that have prints, mixed media, and digital photos in their collection. So here are some of Teodolo Protomartir's prints. And these are Julius Clar's prints. Then we also have the secondary archive. These can be composed of albums. This is also part of Naphamir's collection. And then we have the hundreds of books, thousands of posters, Betacam tapes, and reels in Cesar Hernandez's collection. So the first task when confronted with all of this is to get organized. We document all the materials in their original enclosures before we transfer and rehouse them. We also preserve the photographer's notes and inscriptions. And then we include this in our digital archival database. So some photographers will include parts of their process, such as in the case of Proton Martyr. These are the notes he has behind his prints. This helps us recognize and understand the intentions of the photographer. The next step we do is to separate any damaged negatives or prints from those that can go on to get digitized later on. So the sick or damaged negatives or prints could have water damage, moisture, cracking, flaking. They could have also had like termites or rats as their previous tenants. So due to the ubiquity of photography, especially these days, not too many people realize that photography is a really fragile medium. It's highly susceptible to deterioration. When negatives and prints are stored, the materials they're stored in will over time react adversely with the environment. So it's important to handle it properly, to place it in a cool, dry environment away from light. This also applies to digital prints. And to store it in archival material that has passed the photographic activity test, or the PAT, set by the ISO, or the International Standards Organization. So if it's plastic or paper, it has to be free of chemicals such as polyethylene, sulfur, or acid-free. Unfortunately, these materials, these materials are not readily available in the Philippine market. So these have to be ordered abroad. So once the good, good negatives and prints have been documented and rehoused, we then go on to create contact sheets. So most of the collections do not have contact sheets, thus the need to generate them. In this slide, we have the contact sheets of Wig Theismann. So we were very fortunate that he was able to preserve his contact sheets from the 80s. He has some also from the 70s. So the importance of the contact sheets used to be that it allowed us to view all at once the images from a set of negatives. And then from there, we could judge the qualities and the merits of an image. In an archive, it also serves as a cataloging and identification purposes. So after a selection has been made, we move into scanning and restoration. And from here, we have all the issues that were not readily seen by the naked eye begin to arise when we enlarge or scan an image. So here, this is an image or a photograph, or a negative rather, that was scanned. This is part of the collection of George Gascon. And here we can see some common issues that range from dust, scratches. We also have discoloration, tears, and then from there we also have the severe one, and this is my personal favorite, in the form of molds. So these take quite some time to restore and remove. So here, this is the scanned negative, and a side by side, scanned and restored. And this is the restored version. So once an image has been digitized, it is now subject to technical manipulation. It's important that one should always try to stay objective when doing restoration, in order to remain faithful to the photographer, their vision, and of course their legacy. Another important thing to note is that the digital file or archive is in no way, as Katya had mentioned earlier, a substitute for the analog original. And unfortunately, we do not have the experts and the facilities in the Philippines to conserve and restore the originals just yet. So when it comes to digital restoration, one should always be up to date with emerging technologies. It's a constant learning process with how to apply these new technologies to different scenarios in restoration. Here's an example of a print from the collection of Proto-Martyr. In this print, there were some areas of the photograph that were already eaten away by molds, and they had discolored the print. So for this restoration, I actually had to use a forensic software to recreate the details. Um, Most of the time, we use like um, Affinity or Photoshop. However, in this case, I did not want to destroy certain aspects of the print or the image, so I had to source my software elsewhere. So on that note, I now turn you over to Miguel, who will discuss the post process.
Doon din saan? Yung slide. Hello? Hello? Yes.
Yeah, Miguel, we can hear you.
Now we're going to the post process.
Your voice is not too clear now. Can you fix your mic? Miguel, you can start.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you now. Again.
Mas clear na po.
Yes.
So, we're going na sa sa post process. So, post process is a very meticulous process. So, and also it's trial and error. So, you need to study or research muna the artist and the photographer before editing the material. Tapos, we need to know the style of the photographer and the character of the photographer, and also a brief history of the photographer, kung paano siya nabuhay, and also his genre. And the thing is, you need to know the how he process or paano siya mag-process or mag-print ng kanyang uh, series. So, and also you need to see the perspective of the artist and ano yung gusto niyang iparating. So, ito yung Julius Clark na post-process. It is very detailed, highly detailed siya, landscape. So, it is not like you're editing or post-processing the picture na parang ito turn to black and white lang. You need to understand what is the context of it. And also as a photographer myself, you need to understand what is his intentions, the vision of the artist, the photography. We use Photoshop and also Lightroom to manage the files. Lara will give us the restored file. And then after na ma-restore, we post-process it dun sa pinakamalapit dun sa kanyang final series. So you need to know then the intentions, tapos you need to keep the integrity of the photo and also the legacy. So if you see here, this is the post process with test prints. So in test prints, it is very meticulous also because you need to parang vital siya kasi kailangan same na same and also dapat na andun pa rin yung integrity ng photo with the test prints. So kahit nakakalibrate na yung monitors mo and printers, pero there's certain papers na iba yung register sa print. So you need to print a lot of test prints kasi if you know the all photographers then are heavy test print din sila to capture the perfect photo or to print the perfect photo. Yun nga, here makikita nyo dito na post-process siya. It's on test print stage pa rin because may mga hindi pa parehas dun sa original copy. Yung nasa top yung original and then sa baba yung test prints. So the test prints are checked with Miss Katya to have further quality control. And also we are chatting and learning about the series and the photographer. Hindi lang siya yung parang, edit lang natin. Not like that. You need to understand the history of the photo, how it impacts when you look at it in a print na. And then, so here's a test print and master print of Sir Nap Hamir. As you see at the picture. So the master print framing will be discussed by Luis.
Hello, I'm Luis. I'm here to discuss about printing and processing, framing process. First up is printing. There are many ways to print a photograph. Okay. First off is darkroom print, which is one of the oldest, if not the oldest way to print an image. Using a photographic paper, a paper covered with a light-sensitive emulsion to transfer an image from a negative using an enlarger to a paper. So this is yung more on a traditional process. Today for digital printing, one of the most popular is laser and inkjet printing. Laser printing, it's the same technology as a photocopier machine. It uses a laser to project the image into a drum, and then the drum collects the ink and toner and transfer it to the paper. It's it's same as a offset printer, pero it uses laser instead of etch metal in the offset. The next is inkjet printer. Inkjet printer creates an image using a very tiny droplet of ink onto the paper. It's one of the most common printer that we have even in the office or our home. Out of all of this technology, we use an inkjet printer to produce the image we want. Compared to a darkroom printing, inkjet printer is easier to use and easier to predict the outcome of the print. But still, we try to make the quality of the photograph or print close to the quality of the darkroom print, which most of the photographers like, especially for a black and white prints. Also, there are things to consider when using an inkjet printer. To print your photograph, especially when you want it to last a very long time, first one is the ink. Most home and office inkjet printer use a dye-based ink. The problem with dye-based ink is that it cannot handle moisture or water very well. Also, it tends to fade much faster than a pigmented base ink. As I said, so pigmented base ink is better in resisting water and fading. And then there's this paper. If we want to consider the longevity of the print, we want to choose the right paper. The best paper to use is an acid-free paper. Acid is one of the main problem of most of the prints when it comes to yellowing and fading and discoloration. We want to keep the print in a neutral pH level as much as possible to resist fading and discoloration. For the paper, we use paper called honey mule, and their paper Photorag Barita, which gives a very strong contrast and a good tonal range that is good for a black and white print. We also choose this paper because it resembles of the darkroom prints that most of our existing photograph that we handle. It's more similar than a darkroom silver highlight print. When it comes to printing, we also need to determine the size that we want. One good way to start is to choose from the standard paper or photo sizes. Out of the many international standard size, we decide on these three for a 2:3 ratio, which is a 35mm film format or a full frame DSLR. After all the printing, we need to present a photograph by framing. Framing essentially it's to enclose the photo under glass so it will be protected by any substance like dust, insect, or people touching directly in the print, which may cause discoloration because of the oil in the finger. Of course, it's all so add a good aesthetic presentation when displaying the work. Things to consider when framing your work. Aside from the aesthetics, we want to know how your photos will be framed or what kind of material to use. A standard classic approach when framing a photograph is to have a matting around it. Matting is not just for the looks, it acts as a buffer between the glass and the photograph because over time, the photo may stick into the glass, which may become inseparable, like the photo that you see here. So over time, the moisture gets into the paper and the paper, since it's directly sticking to the photograph, it adheres somehow permanently to part of the photo, which is inseparable. Another thing to consider is how will they mount or attach the photograph. Some of the framers here just apply ordinary clear tape or even masking tape to attach the photo, which is not a good practice if we want to preserve the photo. Because the chemical in those adhesive will stain the photo over time. Some even apply ragdi, the contact cement, directly in the back of the photograph, which is much worse. One way to attach or mount your work into the frame without damaging it is to use a photo corner. It just holds the four corners of the photo without applying any glue directly to the paper. Here's the breakdown of framing to the frame to the backing. Just to illustrate how the framing process from the frame cell to the backing. Next is just to show some experimental approach, because the one we showed you before is somehow a standard approach into framing and printing. And this is a work by Mr. Napamir. He printed two sets of images and then tear it apart, and then combine those two sets of third print to make a new image, which gives a more three-dimensional because of the layers. Of course, we didn't use photo corners here since it's more permanent type of work. We use a wet paste to glue each of the layer, which is a neutral pH paste and won't stain your work. Here's another example of a bad practice in framing. Mounting the photograph there like in a bare plywood using a contact cement. As you can see, the plywood is also acidic material, and once the plywood deteriorate, it will affect the print itself. To at least save the image, like like Miguel said, we can scan the photograph. We can scan or photograph the photos and restore it digitally, and then we can print. We'll still make sure all the details from the original are there. Again, we're gonna discuss how to manage the digital and physical files. We'll give the mic to Miguel again to discuss about digital assessment management.
Okay, at this point, Miguel, are you continuing with the slide presentation? Or
Once
is it just going
all
to
of
be
us
a discussion? Okay, can we request Lara, Luis, and Katya to turn on your video so that you can all join in your discussion?
Okay. For the physical assets, I think Lara will talk about it muna. Yung...
No. Sige.
Sige.
I can just give, actually this, wait, bakit may echo? May echo? I can just give, you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah,
Wala namang echo sa amin.
actually this topic I think is all of us, no? Because it's something that we're still currently trying to figure out. I'll just touch on the current state of our physical assets. So far, we've bought metal cabinets. That's where we store the albums and the negatives, everything. But we're still, actually, we really have to find a dedicated person just to attend to the physical assets, filing, everything. We created a special storage for the framed art, framed photographs. So, but it's archives are very tricky because they very quickly expand. Um, the challenges having to do with the digital asset management will be discussed by Miguel and maybe Luis, but it's actually, in my opinion, also very challenging. There are the basic yun nga, best practices, no, but it's really hard to follow, and it starts with the photographer themselves, how they start their this digital asset management. Okay, Miguel and Luis, can you just say something quickly also?
So oops, in managing the files, you need first to rename the files lalo pag kakascan mo lang. So in managing the files, you need to rename it first. So and also you need to folder the files by artist, by series also. Kasi you need kaya siya kailangang i-rename first para mas madali siyang i-research like we did. Madali siyang i-file in folders like sa Mac. Ngayon, ang gamit namin Macs. So, pakita ko lang po yung tip, yung naming convention.
So Lara, you're sharing the screen again. Yeah, okay.
Yun. So this is a small tip lang for renaming the files. Initial name, surname, series. So you need to first to have a artist description. It is also mas madali siyang hanapin lalo kung na-rename mo na yung files. 'Di ba? We use Mac and Windows. So there's a search bar na if you need to research this artist, you just type the surname. So ganun ang filing. So here may tip din ako na artwork status and naming. So you need to put the date kung kailan mo siya ginawa or kailan siya in-scan. So you have a file na mas madali mo siyang makita talaga. And also the status, print ba siya or web-based, and the number. So here is a small naming convention, tawag dito naming convention, na para mas madali nyong ma-file tapos madali nyo ring i-paste sa kanyang iba't ibang folder. So para may current folder, merong mother folder, tapos inside that folder meron dong series. So mas madali siyang i-files. So may add po ba kayo?
Can I just ask, is it in effect, is it like a catalog number, no?
Yes po, yes po.
Yes, because there's a massive amount of material in the collection, we tend to catalog a photographer by series and then by medium. So it's as I showed you earlier. Earlier, we have the primary archive and then the secondary archive. So we name each one under a series and then under a medium. And then from there, we enter this into our digital archive. So we can segregate what goes on up to our web, what goes on for printing, what stays in the archive. And it's much easier for us. So we have different views where we can pull up a file based on certain key terms. We can pull up also an image. And then we can track this down later on if we have to do several prints for a certain series.
Okay, Luis, would you like to add anything to this discussion for now? I mean, nakamute ka. You're on mute.
I guess they cover up most of the digital assessment management in terms of archiving. So I guess we'll proceed.
Okay, maybe we'll, I'm sure we'll have further questions, no, from the attendees. We actually have 123 attendees in this session, just to show you how much interest there is, no, in photography and archiving photography. Okay, so we'll end with this group's discussion for now and proceed to the next part of the session with the with a brief critique, no, or response from JPaul Manzanilla. JPaul finished his PhD in Southeast Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore, focusing on the history of photography in the Philippines. In his dissertation, he examined the optical unconscious in American colonial era photographs, the problem of place in post-war newspaper and magazine pictures, the interrelationship of photography, revolution, and historical consciousness in protest demonstration photos, and the crisis of witnessing in the documentary photographs of the drug war. He was engaged in research and presented papers at conferences in the Philippines, India, the UK, Vietnam, Canada, the US, and Thailand. And he hopes to contribute to building a photography and visual culture archive in the country. So JPaul, thank you for joining us. And you can start with your present discussion.
Magandang hapon. Thank you for inviting me to this very important discussion on photography and archiving. I'll be giving some points, talking points for the general audience so as to engage the broader public, hindi lang po yung photographers and archivists. And second is to give some points on the discussion on the talk given by Luzviminda members, and later on engage with the audience in the Q&A section. So first, I'd like to clarify for the audience, what do we mean by archives? These are primary sources for studying a photographer, an artist, a historian, an event, an affair, or a historical, any historically important thing. And when we say primary sources, these are documents or materials that deal directly with with something that happened, and it is generated by the activity concerned and mostly unpublished. So what we see in the library is specifically different from what we see in the archive. Uh, Next is the necessity of archiving. We have a lot of documents from the past, which we need to preserve, record, and because they are pieces of history that would give us knowledge about the past and lessons from the past. This is particularly important because the photograph is a primary source and a visual source for studying history and reconstructing memory. I'm sure you've experienced this in a lot of political debates and social discussions about the different social and political convulsions that have been happening in our country and the world in the last few years. To say the least, we have a lot of problems in Philippine archival conditions. Main one is the problem of climate and chemistry, where the heat and humidity in a tropical country greatly affect the preservation of materials. Second is that we have a general lack of archives. It's not a priority among state institutions, even among many public institutions at the local level. There is no specific budget in a lot of government agencies for the archives. And there is a general absence of programs for preserving materials, even for their local history. Most of the efforts have been done by concerned individuals and advocates. Uh, and whenever there are institutions, you observe a lot of unprofessional practices, carelessness and mistreatment in treating materials, which is basically a matter of lacking knowledge about the correct way of preserving things. So this is related to the culture of documentation in many other countries and in our culture among concerned people versus the culture of negligence, specifically if because you lack resources. So how do you choose what to preserve? And so it's basically a matter of education, how to instill historical consciousness among people. Uh, because photographs are not only individual and personal and intimate documents, but they are also historical, social, and cultural that may help us understand our society even more. I've looked for some uh, photography archives in the Philippines, and there are only two notable ones as far as I can remember. One is the Retrato Photo Archive of the Filipinas Heritage Library and Luzviminda. These are centers or archives specifically dedicated to photography. We have a lot of historical and photographic documents. For example, the Cebuano Study Center at the University of San Carlos, uh, the Western Visayas Study Center at the University of the Philippines, Visayas in Iloilo City. They have documents as well as UP Baguio, but they don't have uh, archives yet for photography. This is contrasted to the photography archives in our neighboring countries. And here I thank photo historian Wu Bin Zhuang for mentioning the Luang Prodang Buddhist archive in Laos. There's also the Chiang Mai House of Photography. And because of royal imperative, there is the Royal Photographic Society of Thailand Photography Archive. Challenges. Uh, this is for everyone. I suggest that we should gather everything that would eliminate photographs. Not only photographs. We should preserve not only photographs, but photographers' notes, their concept papers, their diaries, and their journal entries. This is closely related to what the Luzviminda team has mentioned about the integrity and style of the photographers, all the letters and documents of correspondence. I'm specifically interested, for example, in how Romy Vitug, the photographer Romy Vitug, uh, engaged in photographic expeditions all throughout the Philippines and how he corresponded with the publishers and editors and chose what to publish in the magazines and how to frame and choose angles in the places and peoples that they photograph. So we should also look at the assignment papers of newspaper and magazine companies. I mean, what have they specifically stipulated for certain photographers to cover? For example, Joe Galvez has been publishing in his social media account uh, his photographic expeditions in Mindanao. And we have letters of funders and publishers and supporters. We have all the correspondence documents between the photographer, the publisher, the editor, and all the people that he connected with in the process of doing his work. The travel papers, the receipts, the memorandums, and all the related publications. And at the meantime, we should devote specific photography archives in our libraries. We have a lot of state universities that have, I think, um, not big, but somehow workable funding for doing these things, aside from big and financially able private colleges and universities. For example, the Ateneo Library has the American Historical Collection and the Ateneo Library of Institute of Women's Writing. Maybe they can initiate with the Ateneo Art Gallery the formation of the Ateneo Photography Archive. And certain initiatives in regional study centers from the Cordillera region up to Mindanao. So right now we should start massive solicitation from individuals, groups, and organizations to share and or submit photos for archiving, not only for the individual artists that Luzviminda mentioned, but we have a lot of photography organizations that are willing to share their collection with any institution that would promise to protect and carry out the protection and preservation of their work. Photography education, not only for the artists and archivists, but for the general public. What are the different photographic practices? How do we archive? How do we study photography? And develop specialization on technical aspects of archiving, especially on printed materials, again, in a tropical country such as the Philippines. And when we do digital archiving, we should be keen on how it supplements and complements the saving, the photographs themselves. How do we save photographs in the digital format? How do digital copies fill in the gaps in the printed materials? Do we have digital copies of related publications or other bodies of work relating to the photographer's work that are missing? They may help us explicate the printed photographs. So the imperative to digitize in the light of rapidly expiring and missing materials. So this is a challenge to map the history of Philippine photography generally. How do we begin with the commercial beginnings? The first photographs in the Philippines are not housed in the Philippines. They're in the Hispanic Society of America. Sinibaldo de Mas mentions that there were a lot of studios in Manila, in the Intramuros, Binondo area in the 1860s, 1850s, and 60s. If you recall, the photography was invented in the 1830s, and a few years after that, there were a lot of studios that have been established in Manila. So how do we try to get copies of those works? This has been studied, but maybe we can review colonial photography once again with a specific focus on indigenous visuality. How do they see themselves in light of how others saw them? And particularly important in the history of Philippine photography is the role of the Chinese and Japanese camera sellers and photo printers. The Japanese, because they had the technology and they have a lot of companies who are specifically dedicated to photography, uh, they they engage in selling cameras notably in Baguio, in Metro Manila, and Davao. And after the war, a lot of those, because of the anti-Japanese campaign and hatred of many people, they surrendered their collection and materials to Chinese entrepreneurs. So these are, you know, very important part of Philippine photographic history that we need to work on. Um, Political underpinnings of photography, there are official histories, especially those made by the public officials. But we can read those works vis-a-vis the works of non-government organizations or the work of individual artists, and special attention to the techno-artistic development of photography, how the development of camera and printing and exhibition technologies are inseparable from the artistic development of a medium. This is where the artists, our photographers play a significant role in explicating how they picture things and places and people, and how they negotiated with the difficulties of finding materials. As Luzviminda mentioned, many of the materials in the preservation are still sourced from abroad. So in the production process, in the photographic production process, how do our photographers deal with the limitations and advances of technology, specifically German, Japanese, and American technologies? They are very much helpful in illuminating photographers' techniques and the role of photography magazines, clubs, and organizations. So there are a lot of spaces for exhibition and conservation. I understand that Luzviminda itself is still physically is still concerned with the physical exhibition of materials because they are very much devoted to the physicality of things. But maybe later on we can have a massive digital archive for sharing all the materials that we have collected in the Philippines to share with uh, artists, students of art, and the general public. And the special role of the World Wide Web. Getty Images has been collecting almost all the images that have been produced worldwide. How do we position ourselves in the light of this aggressive campaign to house a single collection of photographs? And ultimately, can we find a Filipino way of seeing, or is it still necessary to find a Filipino way of seeing? And I want to say that we should discuss this in a plural term. What about Philippine vernacular photographies, specifically the different indigenous groups in the Philippines? How do they use the camera? Next, this is not part of the slide anymore. Is my comment on some of the points raised by the group, and maybe we can elaborate this in the Q&A section. There are differing perspectives of artists and archivists in the preservation of photographs. How do we negotiate authenticity and originality on one side, which is authenticity and originality are concerns of many archivists, and how do we negotiate that with the artistry and style that you mentioned? And what if the photographer has inconsistent style in the different genres that he engaged in? Also, how do you coordinate with librarians and in systematizing your collection? Maybe each photography archive is doing its own work according to its system that works best for them. But we should have a Library of Congress type
Right.
of a comprehensive and systematic archiving of photography. And how do you determine the style and the subject? Do you first adhere to the photographer's label, how he organizes his work, or how, for example, the Manila Times, the Manila Chronicle, the Philippine Panorama captioned their photographs? Another thing is that's I'm specifically concerned with how all these works will help the public, because if you visit different archives in different places, ordinary people, pangkaraniwang tao, benefit from the archives. You see, for example, how will Alex Baluyuk's photographs help in the prison reform system? You remember his Brotherhood project. I'm sure there are a lot of materials, there are a lot of archival materials that we can collect from that, which would help the criminal justice system in the Philippines. Another thing is how do in other countries they visit archives to get photogrammetry of the lands which their families used to own
Mhm.
and to get those documents to help them in the legal settlement of all those disputes. These are practical. I'm practical ways of benefiting from the archives, so that the public would see it not as a high and mighty project from up above, but something that really concerns them. So yun lang po muna, and I'll wait for the Q&A.
Okay. Thank you, JPaul. I think your presentation poses more top issues to address, and I think that's good for future for succeeding programs related to this topic. But for now, we can proceed with the question and answer. So Katya, what I'll do is I'll just read out some of the questions for you for everyone to reply to. I just want to shout out to Bobin, who's in the audience. JPaul mentioned him. He actually, we worked with him in the Not Visual Noise exhibit catalog as well. So Christine Palatao has this question: who has access to the archive? Do photographers whose works you have archived? So this is specifically directed to Luzviminda. Do photographers whose works you have archived have personal access to it? Can these photographs photographers make modifications to the restored images?
Actually, sorry, wait. Is there an echo?
It's okay. We can, okay naman. We can,
Okay naman.
oo, hindi naman siya, distracting.
The files, the original masters, negatives, everything actually belong to the photographers. There are particular photographers that prefer to store their materials with us for safekeeping, such as Alex. Even Nap, he's dumped a lot of his things here. They're very eclectic. But actually, that's the thing. We're just waiting for people to interact more with us, with us being, we're here to help. Actually, that's a little bit the problem. We are open regular days. I think I've somehow advertised this project enough, but for some reason we're not getting enough interactions. No, like I say in the contact page. If you want to curate, like JPaul mentioned, if you're interested in a particular collection and you want to do a project, you're very welcome to propose it. No need for long proposals. You can just talk to us. Students can actually do research. I mean, what's online is a starting point, and that's general public. On purpose, we've done the writings to be very accessible. The stories in which how we present each photographer or photo practitioner, we really intended for general public, no? So we want them to be very relatable, actually. So, but if you want to dig deeper, anyone is welcome to come here. Of course, the photo practitioners are free to come in and out and to do whatever they wish with the files.
Okay, I think part of the question was, can these photo practitioners make modifications to the restored images? I think she's referring to the digitally restored images.
Yes.
So,
they can also do, I mean, for example, Napamir, he's
Mm-mm.
really one of the great examples about that. He constantly updates his work, his 70s work
Reworks it, no?
yeah. So we are very happy to also experiment. We're actually an art based organization. We're visual artists too. It's
Mm-mm.
up to the photo practitioner if they want to do those experimentations. That's their call, di ba? Their creative call. Oo.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. Matthew Lopez asks, has there been any new information that surfaced on Philippine photographer Teodulo Protomartir? Any new information?
JPaul, are you wanting to
J.
answer
Paul, would
that?
you like to reply?
Oh,
Any new information since probably, I think he was featured, he was part of the Manila Biennale, diba?
well, the story of his photographs is
Mm.
actually a prime archival story because it was only found by a cinematographer in an antique shop in Kamuning, and he actually bought the photos and collaborated with the photographer J. Javier to mount an exhibition about his work. But I've seen few documents about him. When I was doing my research at the Lopez Library, I found out that they're a family of bowlers or boxers. I mean, they're an athletic family, and Teodulo Protomartir uh, engaged full time in photography. He also uh, was photographing for American publications, I think. So yun lang palang po muna yung alam ko sa kanila.
Has there
That
been
is
a,
a that is a major concern
uh
because Luzviminda, I think Lara mentioned the photography is ubiquitous, but once it is found, people tend to be exclusive about the documents. So maybe we can have something that would be publicly shared, so a lot of people would have access to these
Uh,
photographs and interpret them according to their own ways of seeing. So isang bagay yung exhibit siya ng isang mga dedicated group katulad ng Luz Viminda, and Silver Lens has been doing a lot of projects on photography. But there's also another the aspect of making all these things publicly shareable. So people won't
yeah.
ask specialists if there are new information about this
mm,
photographer. Kasi sa ibang lugar, madaling makita yan. They would just type and then may public portal and then they would lead you to sources.
Katya, would you like to follow up
Yeah,
on that?
actually, there was another exhibition curated by Sir J. Javier, 2020. So he came up with, you know, an exhibition. So this was the follow-up from the Silver Lens or the Manila
Mm.
Biennale. But yes, I actually offered to the proto martyr, particularly Jay, that anytime he wishes to come up with an exhibition, we can consolidate our collection with his collection or other people's collections, so we can get a more comprehensive view of the of the photo practitioner. But yes, there has to be more openness and more collaboration in the interest of research, really, you know, and also to consider nga saving the primary master files, the negatives.
Mm. Okay. Any other
Uh,
comments from the group? Yes, J. Paul.
I think the most important thing, one of the most important collections that we have to work on now is that of Romy V2.
Mm-mm.
Uh, he's been discussing his works with a lot of people, and he has so many uh, photographs about his photojournalistic projects since the 60s. And he's more involved now with Ang Probinsyano, but the TV series. But his works would give us ample view of what is said to be the golden age of Philippine photography in 60s and 70s, where a lot of photojournalists engaged in official career photographic work with newspapers and magazines, but also on their free time took photographs that would freely, uninhibited, and unhampered by official imperatives of how to photograph certain places and people. Ibig sabihin, their own style.
Yeah.
And maybe we can pit that style with their works in newspapers and magazines and see the difference. What has been omitted, what has been emphasized. Did he select certain angles for certain photographs? And why were so many other photographs not published? So, you really, and this is actually a problem for the archive because you can only know all these things if you get other supporting documents. Not only the photographs, but the negatives, the assignment papers, the correspondence, tape recorded conversations, uh, the longest running newspaper, English language newspaper in the Philippines, the Manila Times. They still have a lot of photo negatives in their office in Intramuros, and they're still unsourced. They allowed me access to that, but there's still no archival institution
Oh,
that
wow.
deals with them. And these are tens of thousands of photographs. So maybe Luzviminda can work on that. Ibang photographers here, dozens of photographers. And this is the Manila Times, the longest running newspaper, English language newspaper in the Philippines.
That's maybe a decade's worth of work.
Yeah.
I saw 80s and
Patay
90s.
tayo.
And then you can also see the technology, Konica, yung mga printing technologies. And also to see it also from the ground. I mean, the photo studios in malls, we can also source their collections to see the development of style in studio photography. Yung mga group pictures that students and barkadas do in the 90s and early 2000s, and how they changed with the development of technology.
I think there are several curatorial projects there in the making, based on what you just said, no, JPaul. So maybe these are projects that could be pursued by different entities. No, I think the objective also is also to encourage similar endeavors like what Luzviminda is doing, but of course with the right technology and skills. No, the fact that they shared the challenges is also to make real what is the scope, what would be the scope of work, no, for an archiving project like Luzviminda. Okay, we'll proceed with more questions kasi dumadami. Okay, next, Nadine Castro, wondering what this archival preservation work might look like in the near future. So much art is digital and stored in the cloud. Shout out to all the Notes app poets. Sorry, I didn't get that. Ano, baka iba yung. And then the same Nadine also later posted, would greatly appreciate any links, resources, colonial photography, specifically US-Philippine War. Okay, I think you know Nadine, ano? Kasi I think she said hi to everyone earlier. I'm not sure if I got that right. So, does anyone want to reply to her questions? How do you foresee the scale of this archival preservation work that you've started? Especially in terms of storage, no, digital as well, digital storage in terms of scale and technology. Maybe Lara can reply, can give her reply on this.
Yeah. As much as possible, we try to document everything, but there really is so much. So we have to, prioritize some materials over others, no? So like poems or notes, that secondary archival material, we prioritize negatives and prints, whether they're digital or analog. But we don't really try to keep everything on the cloud. We try to safeguard them instead in-house. We do share information on the website, but we're also quite aware of intellectual property rights,
Yeah.
So, yeah. So,
Katya would like to
Yeah.
add?
In the near future, yun nga, for the purpose of research, we're planning to put some more materials and make it accessible to the public, such as the contact sheets. Because that's the reality. Although someone can come here physically, look at everything, no, but the contact sheets will help people see the bigger picture of what's in the collection. Because as I said, most of our selections are, it's really from a singular, perspective of, but there's many possible projects, and each project will require different types of photographs. So each time you look at the archive, you can think of different projects. So yeah, the contact sheets I'm planning to put like on a G drive context, and then also with the also recommendation of Wubin, we also want to digitize some photo books to also for further research. So that's secondary materials.
Okay, thank you. From John Mark Aaron Pineda, you will like this. If you're accepting volunteers, how can they approach, or what is the process to be part of the team? So merong ng mga nag-offer, at least maybe, do you have an internship program to um, for students who wish to pursue this field of practice?
hey, before Katya answers that, I
sige.
can flash the website.
Yes,
sige,
please.
sige.
Please. I think that's good.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, basically, we've been, waiting for people to knock on our doors, no?
Yeah.
Sa totoo lang. We never really advertise internships and volunteers specifically kasi nga, I didn't really, although Benil, we've had from them, and general internships in the studio, so we orient them. But it's of course a big responsibility, no, to also um, take on, no, people. So I'm very interested because we have a long way to go, right? We need people that are optimistic, very interested, learning history through photography actually. So okay naman, but we'll have to design like the volunteer internship program. There are still no specifics, but they can also approach us informally also. We're very approachable. We don't, we're talagang friendly. Oo.
Meron bang parang period that they can file their application so that the internship internship will run within a specific period? Or wala, open naman?
Walang ganong period.
Mm-mm.
I'm afraid with periods a little bit, no?
Mm-mm.
But there could be a probationary period, right? To
Mm-mm.
make sure that they're truly interested, maybe
Yeah.
a month. Pero it's very fastidious to
Fluid.
teach people. And
Mm-mm.
it's also, we try, just because that's the nature of archiving, we try to not change hands too much.
Mm-mm.
Kasi
Yeah, that's true.
you will see that like when
Oh.
someone else edits a photograph,
Mm-mm.
parang you see their hand in it. Actually,
Mm-mm.
the less intervention, the less personal, the better. So judgment, it's a continuous training of familiarizing yourself with
Mm-mm.
specific materials, specific photo practitioners. Oo.
No, I saw that you also answered on Flores's ano to, question regarding internship. Okay, Ricardo yan. As a photographer, I've been comfortable with C prints with Kodak and Fujifilm due to their convenience and similarity to the silver gelatin process. Is it still considered archival?
Maybe Luis can answer that. Luis?
Um, as of today, most of the mini labs of Kodak and Fuji use a dry base mini lab instead of the uh, wet mini lab that use same process as a dark room, but in a digital form. So archival uh, is a somehow a certification that it will last for a long time. And as far as I know, um, the Kodak and Fujifilm print doesn't have those certification that they guarantee that your photos will somehow last or maybe fade proof. But still, even it's not, even if your photo is not archival or not acid free, all you can do is make sure the environment of the environment where your photograph is it's in an ideal environment, which is away from high moisture, um, away from direct sunlight, and of course, make sure it's proper. If it's not framed, it's in a proper what do you call
Storage.
that? Storage, yeah,
Like
or a film,
mm-mm.
a plastic film, which doesn't contain, like Lara said, a polyethylene. Um, uh, most conservatory use a mylar sheet,
Mylar, yeah.
which doesn't contain harmful chemical like most of the plastic. So even it's not archival, you can store it in a mylar sheet, or you can frame it, but stay away from direct sunlight.
I think it's important your discussion on framing. You showed some bad framing practices, which applies not only to photographs but works on paper in general. We've seen that, and it's good that there are more framers who are aware of good practice. So we have more options now. Um, Lady Krista Rigor, just want to piggyback on the question about accepting volunteers. Okay, I'm currently taking MA Art Studies. What you do is exactly my research interest. Would love to help out. So maybe you can, maybe lady, what you can do is send an email to the Luzviminda team through their website. Okay. Angelo de Mesa, Miss Katya, I'm willing to pitch our students, ayan, to intern, volunteer in LPU Cavite to help. I'm sure they can help, especially in the retouching and perhaps file organization. So, but it's true. You need accepting interns and volunteers is also a lot of work for the institution, no, that's hosting the program. So we also need to be very careful or selective. Wubin
Yeah.
asks, is there a plan to ensure the long-term sustainability of Luzviminda from a financial standpoint? Does the internet, and second question, does the internet provide an opportunity or a challenge to the work of Luzviminda in the context of the Philippines, where the value of the General Archive is still uncertain?
Yeah, that's the crucial question. The crucial question. Actually, um, yeah, I think the Luzviminda project has basically gone so far already. And I think, yun nga, it's like we're at the point of no return, di ba? Like no backing out, it's just one straight road. Um, that's really the biggest question. How can we proceed in developing it as a self-sustaining. I don't want to say parang yun nga, sometimes it sounds very institutional, right? Like museum or institute or something, no? But we have to actually move in that direction very fast already. So that's a big step. But it's still unclear, no? But I've already made some actions to parang make it eventually stand on its own. But definitely, I need to reposition it a little bit, because it's currently a project of our company. Um, I want this to last beyond us.
Yeah.
How to sustain it. I have some ideas, pero yun na nga, I'm not the orthodox type, right? So it might be like not very typical, but we need supporters, okay? Because I believe even if like currently we're a for-profit company doing this project, I believe if you really think it's a good project, we should be getting support, right?
Funding, yes.
Yeah, it's clear naman that we're doing a good job, right? Actually, those are the things that I've changed in the website. I actually added. I think last year I added sponsor logo space.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, most of those logos at the moment are parang more like partnerships, like people that did common projects like Huawei's project or the project from San Diego, a film group promoting films. But I need, the people that, for example, Canon, Epson, we use Epson scanners. They should be a bit more, I think,
Proactive.
yeah. History is really a big, important, no? Important to photography. So I've added that, but for some reason I haven't gotten any offers. Tapos, I'm also really trying to plan out like how to sell prints. There's a provision in the website now for a shop,
Yeah, I
which
saw
I'm
that.
launching this um, this month of May. But once again, it's like a kind of worms because doing an e-commerce setup also is a lot of work, no? The production,
Yeah.
streamlining, shipping, all that. But that's the only way that can be sustainable. So it's parang I'm a strong believer of the marketplace, rather than a more static setup na tipong museum lang and school tours or something. Sorry, pero the marketplace is a more dynamic space. I'm hoping yun nga, there's a lot of people really into photography, those groups, no. I think they could, given the right exposure, they would fully understand the importance of establishing a common ground. I think there has to be just a common ground.
I want to ask JPaul, From your knowledge, you cited in your presentation earlier some archival or entities, archiving entities in different countries. Would you know how they operate? I'm not sure if they, perhaps it's a government entity, but if it's a
Well,
private one, maybe you can also share so Katya can explore different approaches in sustaining
the
the
ones that I
operations.
mentioned are in Theravada Buddhist countries. Those primarily concerned with the function of religion,
Mm,
and they have a monarchy.
mm-mm.
So the Royal Photographic Society of Thailand is an imperative from the monarchy to gather and collect and disseminate photographic works. And their king, in the 19th century, was the first
Mm-mm.
practitioner of photography.
Yeah.
So the
So may
relationship
backing na
is really
ganon.
very close and official. Uh, but there are a few, according to Wu Bin, but this is a step in the right direction to proliferate
Mm-mm.
proliferation of different photography archives. But there should be a state imperative, at least on the part of the government, to immediately preserve whatever it has. Because I once went to the National Media Resource Center, or the Philippine Information Agency
Mm-hmm.
on Visayas Avenue,
Yeah, PIA
and they have a lot of works
materials.
in the 70s and 80s. But I may be, well, I'm not sure whether I can say all these things on this
Would
seminar,
you say
but
it
a lot of institutions are just throwing away
mm-mm.
materials
Yeah.
because they couldn't preserve them.
Mm. Would you say that this can be part of the scope of responsibilities of the National Archives? Because we do have the National Archives.
Yes, there's a bill. I'm not sure whether it's
Mm-hmm.
already been passed into a law about the archival of Philippine films.
Mm.
So there should be a separate one about photography
Photography.
and
Okay.
visual
Mm-mm.
culture.
Yeah.
And it should come from photography practitioners and
Mm-mm.
research
Oh, ayan.
institutions.
That's um
And just to mention,
mm-mm.
one of the biggest photography projects in the 1980s is the photography of the EDSA Revolution, the People, Power, and
Mm.
Eyewitness History. So those are photographs taken by different Filipino photographers. But to complement and supplement that work, there's a lot of archival material housed in the Ateneo Library Institute of Women's Writing, the works written by Monina Alare Mercado. So those are handwritten letters. Uh, I'm not sure if there are receipts and other materials, but they help illuminate the understanding of the book. So these are some of the small initiatives
Mm-mm.
being done by different institutions. But uh, regional study centers, they should initiate this
Can include
project.
that no in their program.
For example, the Central Luzon Study Center, or
Mm-mm.
Pampanga Study Center, or Cordillera Study Center,
Okay.
because
See.
there are still a lot of collections housed by private individuals.
Mm-mm. Okay. Can I just move on to more questions? Eileen Ramirez asks, how does or will Luzviminda help artists negotiate around IPR? With this talk lodged in the art fair promoting NFTs, I'm wondering about liberties possible appropriation that could surface once the archive provides public access or wider public access.
Yeah, actually legal, there's yun nga, the legal issues are very, very it's important that someone's constantly dealing with the legal issues. Like someone right it, the website is right, you cannot right click it to
Mm-mm.
save it. But even
Okay.
with that, I've had a newspaper screen grab it, and
You can
then
screenshot.
after that they just ask permission if they can use it for free. So, ganun pa rin, ganun pa rin. It's they're very liberal because they will always justify, I saw it in the internet already, no? That's the problem with Facebook. I do a lot of my research in Facebook. There's a lot of material there. It's like everyone posts there. You can write the history of Philippine photography according to Facebook at the moment, no? So, I am very conscious of parang mga legal matters. Like I've tried to do my own research. I try to be cautious each step of the way naman. I mean, to the best of our abilities, right? Pero there has to be lawyers helping artists and helping photographers manage their assets. It's called, yun nga, you have to manage your assets kasi actually that's the reason they're poor. Kasi nga yung asset management you can license it again. For, let's say someone publishes a book, di ba? They can pay for it They should pay for it actually. But many people are shy or don't understand they can charge for it. And yeah, to a certain degree, we're trying to be the bridge. I've encountered like Napamir showed me a request to publish a photo of his father in a book. Pinakita naman niya, tapos he said it's for free. But yun nga, you have an option to say it's not for free.
Or at least have a parang a minimal fee, no? To ano.
Yun nga
Do you apply? Do you put a watermark on images that you upload in your website?
I really don't like that kasi distracting. I'm a
Kasi
visual
nga,
artist.
yeah, I know, pero
Oo
yun
nga,
yung
oo nga.
ano na kami.
Protection, as in
Yeah,
super
oo.
protection.
But because if they really need a good image, they go to
Oo.
us, they ask permission, and we have a system.
Oo. Without being ano nga, parang for me, my access, like I wouldn't want to put it on the website, but yun nga, it's hard to police But definitely, we're conscious naman that the files are not really like for printing, di ba? Kasi if someone buys a print from us, for example, pwede rin naman nila i-copy ulit, di ba? Posible din yun. So, there's all types of parang image theft rin. It's hard to control for sure. Or like the next minute binenta niya sa auctions. Marami talagang things that goes around But just a last note about collecting photography. One is, yes, paperworks are hard to maintain. That's one of the reasons people don't collect photography. Pero another main concern of the, parang let's say, for me, a conservative collector, is that they want a limited edition. Personally, I'm a bit against that concept kasi nga with one-off artworks or limited editions, the photographer or even the photographer's family will not benefit from it in the long term. Parang once you sell it like 3 piraso, ganon, that's the end of the line for the photographer. But if it was more open, no, more open or less contrived, the opportunity for the family even to use it as some sustaining funds is a higher possibility. But that doesn't mean you cannot create different categories of selling your work, like licensing or, there's many different strategies.
Okay, thank you. We're running out of time. There's several more. They're mostly comments, not questions, and they're very interesting comments. There are some who are bringing up possible collections that you might want to consider archiving. So what we will do is send them to you. The text here in the Q&A box. Maybe you can respond to them. And we also encourage the participants, the attendees, to check out the website of Luzviminda. There's just one question, Pioneer Studios, do they accept walk-ins for framing jobs? Siguro yun na lang ang ano. Do you?
We typically like to frame just our parang our
But you're-
prints.
Oo.
But once again, we're a very, very friendly studio. We
Okay.
go out of our way to make people happy and satisfied. So we have a network naman of framers as well that
Framers.
we work with. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so on behalf of Art Fair Philippines, thank you very much to everyone, Katya and Luis de Mesa, Lara de Los Reyes, Miguel Gomez, and of course JPaul Manzanilla, who's actually based in, are you based in Hong Kong?
Philippines.
Philippines.
Manila,
Akala ko nasa
Manila.
Hong
Back
Kong ka.
na.
Okay, so thank you for this very interesting conversation. We especially appreciate JPaul's discussion points because it actually further emphasizes, underscores the importance of groups like Luzviminda, no, who need to that need to be more responsive to the needs of photo practitioners, no, and their communities. So again, thank you. The recording will actually be posted after the art fair, so you can check the art fair website for a recording of this conversation. So thank you again, and can I ask Lisa to join us for a screenshot?
Hi, I'm
Tama? Ayan.
here.
Yes, I see you.
Thank you.
Okay, so ST, can you, for the audience, sandali lang, mga a few seconds, give us this.
Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay.
May tunog pa eh. So thank you everyone. Thank you to the attendees. I saw a lot of names, artists, academics, museum people. So thank you for joining this session. And I give the screen back to Lisa.
Thank you to Luzviminda and JPaul Manzanilla for that enlightening discussion on the many issues surrounding the creation of an archive of Philippine photography. This is a massive and ambitious endeavor. Thank you for undertaking it and sharing your knowledge with our audience. And thank you too to Boots of the Ateneo Art Gallery for moderating today. Please check the Art Fair website for more upcoming events. Thank you and good afternoon.